This is an EDH deck tech for Toralf, God of Fury. Toralf, God of Fury is a spoiler from Kaldheim that reads 2 red for a 5/4 legendary creature god with trample. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Toralf deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. For every creature or planeswalker an opponent controls, so not your stuff, if it's dealt non-combat damage, and that damage is excess, so that would be more than the threshold required to kill it, aka its toughness, Toralf will then deal damage equal to the amount of extra damage or excess damage to any target other than that permanent. So, any target other than the permanent that it had excess damage. So the way that you take advantage of Toralf is by dealing excess non-combat damage to your opponent's stuff, of course. But what is the best way to do that? So one of the best ways is with damage wraths. So these are cards that will deal a certain amount of damage to every single creature on the board wide. So, take for example, Blasphemous Act. 8 and a red for sorcery. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. And Blasphemous Act deals 13 damage to each creature. So, let's say, for example, your opponent has 3 1/1s. That's not common, but it's not really unreasonable either. They will take 36 damage. This is almost guaranteed to kill them if they have 3 1/1. It's just really easy for this to deal huge amounts of damage and kill people. Before we begin, please subscribe. Also, this deck is a $200 budget, link in the description, and really it isn't missing much at this budget. Okay, so there's a lot of different variations of how we can do damage to everything. So, as I said before, there's like a set amount of damage you deal to everything. So that could be like the Blasphemous Act, or it could be like Star of Extinction, 5 red for sorcery. Destroy target land. Star of Extinction deals 20 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Yep, it gets better than Blasphemous Act. Or there can be ones that vary. For example, Subterranean Tremors is X and a red for sorcery. Subterranean Tremors deals X damage to each creature without flying. If X is 4 or more, destroy all artifacts. If X is 8 or more, put an 8/8 red lizard creature token onto the battlefield. Or Chain Reaction, which is 2 red for sorcery. Chain Reaction deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. This can either be insane, where it deals huge amounts of damage to all the creatures, and because there's so many creatures on the field, all those creatures are then taking damage and giving you stuff with giving you damage with Toralf, and you can just instantly kill everyone. Or there's like 3 creatures on the field, and it doesn't even kill anything. Like, it's a very wide range, but on the high end, this can be incredibly powerful. And that's similar with Subterranean Tremors. If you have a lot of mana, it can be insane. If you don't, well, you probably don't even want to cast it. We have 14 cards in this damage to all category because we can maintain control of the board. And of course, the idea of this deck is to deal damage to a lot of creatures. So what if we're playing against a deck or multiple decks that just aren't generating a lot of creatures? There just are not enough creatures on our opponent's field. Or maybe there are, and we just want to add more. So then that's where this category, give to opponents, comes in. So the idea of this category is to give our opponents small creatures, which we can then deal a lot of damage to and kill and make our opponents take a huge amount of damage. For example, Farchild's War Riders is 1 and a red for 3/4 with Trample, Rampage 1, and it has Cumulative Upkeep. Have an opponent create a 1/1 red survivor creature token. So if you don't know, Cumulative Upkeep is a keyword that reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, put an age counter on this permanent. Then sacrifice it unless you pay its upkeep cost for each age counter on it. So the first time you'd give away 1, and then 2, and then 3, and it would just keep on adding up over and over and over again. So we can give our opponents stuff, and we don't really have to rely on them making stuff, which they usually will, and make it a little bit easier for us. Another way to take advantage of Toralf's abilities is to duplicate damage. So I'm talking about damage doublers. For example, Dictate of the Twin Gods is 3 red for an enchantment with flash. If a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. So there are 2 main ways that this is incredibly powerful. So first, let's compare a scenario with and without Dictate of the Twin Gods. So let's say an opponent has 2 2/2 creatures. We then deal 6 damage to both of those creatures. So that player would take a total of 8 damage. Let's compare that to with Dictate. The 2 2/2s will take 12 damage, and then the player is going to take 40 damage. That is just a huge effect. Like 8 to 40, it's a compounding effect, and it becomes incredible. We can essentially generate huge amounts of damage just with our opponent's creatures by killing them. Say, for example, our opponent is playing a token deck. They have 5 1/1s, which, by the way, we could feasibly give them. We have 2 damage, right? We have just something that deals 2 damage to target creature. We are then going to deal that to one of the 1/1s. Okay, but that will be doubled, and it will be 4 damage. That leaves 3 excess damage, which is now going to go up to 6 damage. We deal that to another 1/1. Then there's 5 excess. So then it's 10 damage. We deal that to another one. And then there's 9 excess. And it's 18 damage. You see how this just keeps climbing? We do it again. It's 34. And then it's 66. And then it's 130. We can deal huge amounts of damage. And the creatures don't really need to be small. Assuming we start off with damage higher than double the toughness of what we are killing, we can generate more. We can just keep on adding damage on it and eventually get to the point where we can kill someone. It just is going to add up incredibly quickly, and it's incredibly powerful. For that reason, we have 9 cards in this damage duplicating category. So we are dealing damage to all creatures with our wraths. But what about dealing damage to our own creatures? That sounds like a bad thing, doesn't it? Well, it's not. We have this category called Damage Me. So these are cards that want to take damage. For example, Brash Taunter is 4 and a red for 1/1 with Indestructible. Whenever Brash Taunter is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. Also, keep in mind, if we have a damage doubler, we can send Toralf damage to Brash Taunter, and Brash Taunter will then be an additional layer which we can double with. Plus, it's just an additional way to get value from our wraths. Now, we will lose Toralf when we wrath, but we will likely win the game when we wrath. So, we probably don't care. And that's true too for other creatures that we would lose that we actually care about. But really, there aren't very many of those. And I built this deck with that in mind, that we don't really want to care about our creatures because we want to be able to throw them away. The next category is equipment. So, for example, Basilisk Collar, which is 1 for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has lifelink and death touch. Equip 2. So let's go back and read Toralf. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Toralf deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. This means that Toralf is the one that's dealing the damage. So if we were to give him lifelink, for example, all that excess damage he deals is going to gain us life. We can also give him Infect with Grafted Exoskeleton, which is 4 for an equipment, and it says, equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has Infect. It deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters and to players in the form of poison counters. So you can deal poison counters to our opponents, and if they have 10, they will die, which means we only have to deal 10 damage to each of our opponents, which can be incredibly easy to do in this deck. We also have cards that will only deal damage to some creatures and not everything, in case we want to save our wraths or we want removal or something like that. For example, Electro Dominance is X, red, red for an instant. Electro Dominance deals X damage to any target. You may cast a card with CMC X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. You can cast something and you get damage. It's just like the best of both worlds. There's also the other category, which has Repercussion and a couple other misfits. Repercussion is 1 red, red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature is dealt damage, Repercussion deals that much damage to that creature's control. So this is a very powerful, but also a very dangerous card. If played correctly, you can easily win the game, but it can also make you take damage. So if you deal damage to your own creatures, you will die. Other than that, that's the main deck. We of course have ramp, draw, and 37 lands. Nothing really unique there. Toralf is a flip card, and his hammer is 1 and a red for a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature has 1 red tap. Unattached Toralf's hammer. It deals 3 damage to any target. Return Toralf's hammer to its owner's hand. And equipped creature gets +3/+0 as long as it's legendary. I didn't mention that Toralf is a flip card in the video, mostly because I forgot, and also just because the other side really isn't important for the deck. You're never going to want to play him for that.
Made it to the end of this video, you probably enjoyed it, so please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and join my Discord server. Link in the description. There's also links in the description to whatever I talked about in this video, so it should all be there. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.